The next item on the agenda today is House File 4182 from Representative Freiberg. Representative Freiberg, when you are up at the front, you can move your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House File 4182 to the State and Local Government Finance and Policy Committee. Is that correct?
State Government and Local Government Finance and Policy Committee.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Representative Freiberg moves House File 4182 be re-referred to the State and Local Government Finance and Policy Committee. Representative Freiberg, to your bill.
Thank you. House File 4182 is the Equal Access to Broadband Act, which will provide digital equity statewide. Franchising agreements for private sector rental of the public right-of-way has a 40-year proven track record of assuring cable TV build-out to all residents and businesses. Franchise agreements also set forth minimum standards of service and hold companies accountable with non-compliance penalties. The Equal Access to Broadband Act will level the playing field with broadband ISPs while assuring build-out and minimum upload and download speeds to meet the current and future needs of the business and residents statewide. Each local government has unique needs for broadband deployment. This bill allows local officials the option to franchise broadband and ISPs in the public right-of-way. As new providers enter or exit the marketplace, physically placing wires and equipment in the public space, local governments bear the cost and the responsibility of managing the scarce public asset for the various users, which can include telecom, cable, gas, electric, and broadband. As an essential service, broadband needs to be accountable at the local level and help pay for local needs and interests. Community television stations across the state rely on cable TV franchise fees and PEG fees to support coverage of government meetings, closed captioning, local news and events, high school sports, election coverage, information and education that allow residents to engage in their communities. This program has become essential with the loss of local newspapers in many markets. While the programs are distributed on many digital platforms, franchise fees are paid only on decreasing traditional cable TV service. Franchising broadband and ISPs would apply the same provisions as cable TV franchise, leveling the playing field. Nothing in the bill prevents the broadband and ISPs choosing to pass through the franchise fee expense to the customer as a line item fee. Most local cable TV providers have been recapturing this business cost for decades. That's sort of a brief summary of the bill and the need for it. Happy to turn it over to testifiers.
All right. Mr. Bradley, did you have a brief comment now, or are you more available for questions?
I'll be available for questions. I will put just a short amount of testimony, if that's okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Bradley.
Well under
State your
2
name for
minutes,
the
I'm
record.
sure.
Proceed to your testimony.
Thank you, Representative Freiberg, and good afternoon, Chair Stevenson and committee members. My name is Michael Bradley. I'm a partner at the law firm of Bradley Werner, LLC, a firm that represents local governments in telecommunications matters here in Minnesota and throughout the country. Our firm has recently represented Minnesota cities at the FCC supporting the adoption of digital discrimination rules and at the Office of Broadband Development and the development of a meaningful digital opportunity plan. I wanted to address a few concerns that have been raised about House File 4182, the Equal Access to Broadband Act. The first is preemption, and we wanted to assure the committee that there's nothing that preempts local franchising in this bill. There was a U.S. Court of Appeals decision recently that held that broadband can be regulated if consistent with the Federal Cable Act. There's a concern raised about stacking. I'm not sure I completely understand stacking, but the way I'm understanding it's being presented is that there's a claim that multiple layers of government would somehow be able to require a franchise. That's not how franchising works. There's one franchising authority and one franchising authority only. I don't think the bill says anything like that, but if it does, we'll certainly work with Representative Freiberg and the committee and on fixing that. Thirdly, satellite and wireless. Satellite is not included in this bill, primarily because satellite does not use the public rights of way. It's totally wireless, so that would not be included. Under Minnesota statute sections 237.163 subdivision 6D, which is on page 7 of your bill, wireless co-location on government structures is allowed without being required to apply for a franchise. So to the extent that there is a concern raised about wireless companies being subject to franchising, I think that issue is already addressed in state law. And finally, this bill is permissive. There's nothing mandated in this bill, including the requirement of fees. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Wonderful. We're going to take the rest of the testimony first, and just with the last bill, if you two could vacate the podium for a minute, we'll have two people come down at a time. So first we have Dan Rowe, who will be followed by Jody Miller. So if you both could come down and sit at the podium, and then we'll start with Mayor Rowe. Welcome to the committee.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. As you noted, my name is Dan Rowe, and I am in my 14th year serving as mayor of Roseville. For even longer than that, I have represented the city on the North Suburban Communications Commission, or NSCC, which is a municipal joint powers commission that franchises cable operators and operates our community media center for the 9-member cities of our commission, including Arden Hills, Falcon Heights, Lauderdale, Little Canada, Mounds View, New Brighton, North Oaks, and St. Anthony Village. On behalf of the City of Roseville and the NSCC, and concurring with the League of Minnesota Cities, I am pleased to testify in support of HF 4182, the Equal Access to Broadband Act. Through local cable franchising, Minnesota has an established record of protecting consumers and requiring uniform delivery of cable services to residents, providing an important public benefit through community media. We believe that local broadband franchising will replicate that success. Public rights-of-way are, as was noted earlier, limited and valuable resource that local governments make available to private communications and utility companies to operate their businesses. I can tell you firsthand that the marketplace shift from cable services to broadband services is increasing the burden on public rights-of-way and thus the value of their use, while at the same time decreasing cable franchise fee revenue to cities. That cable franchise revenue is what funds our franchise regulatory efforts, as well as, importantly, our community media centers. Community media remains a critical public resource, even more so as we experience the decline and disappearance of traditional sources of local news and information. Community media gives our citizens, in many cases, their only access to government activities, local events, including sports and performing arts, and other important local information. While these media offerings are still viewable on cable television through cable franchising, they are now increasingly streamed via broadband providers. The Equal Access to Broadband Act will modernize franchising and allow cities to franchise broadband companies and ensure all of our residents the same benefits with respect to broadband services that they currently receive as a result of cable franchising in Minnesota. The entities that I represent enthusiastically support HF 4182 and ask you to adopt this legislation. Thank you for your leadership in moving this legislation forward and for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next will be Jody Miller, who will be followed by Brent Christensen.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and Representative Freiberg. Thank you for bringing forth HF 4182. My name is Jody Miller, Executive Director of NDC4 Cable Commission and Town Square Television. I also represent MACTA, a state trade association representing cities, cable commissions, and community television stations across the state. And we are a state chapter of NATOA, a national association that helps us keep our finger on the pulse of broadband, franchising, and PEG programming across the nation. And I will tell you that Minnesota is admired nationally for our strong traditions of broadband, franchising, and PEG programming work. It is my honor to speak on behalf of 135 local PEG stations and the 838 cities who have franchising and some form of local PEG all across the state. By the way, this hearing is being simulcast on local cable channels today, making it accessible to viewers who may not have internet service or a device for streaming. That's today's world. We need to distribute PEG programming on many platforms to reach our residents where they are, and we need to modernize the regulatory and funding structure in order to do this. TST distributes on cable, our website, Vimeo, and Facebook, and other members use YouTube, Hulu, Roku, Apple TV, and many other platforms. But as was mentioned, our funding comes only from traditional cable and is rapidly declining. PEG stations may take many forms. They may be inside a city hall, inside a school or library, or like Town Square Television, an independent nonprofit. The beauty and the challenge is that each local community meets its own unique interests through franchising. MACTA members like me wear many hats. Besides televising about 2,000 hours of local programming last year, we assisted with local broadband efforts, and we took complaint calls from local residents and helped get those resolved through the escalated complaints team at our franchised provider.
And I'll need you to conclude your testimony, please.
We know that our viewers are watching, and I can tell you in my 35 years in this job, our residents don't mind paying franchise fees when they know their dollars are being employed locally to provide our franchise office and our local programming. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next, we have Brent Christensen, who will be followed by Tony Mendoza. Mr. Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members. For the record, my name is Brent Christensen, and I am the President and CEO of the Minnesota Telecom Alliance, or MTA. This year, my members are planning on investing nearly $300 million to expand broadband in Minnesota. However, this bill puts that figure in doubt. I am here to oppose House File 4182, and it's important for the committee to understand that no other state in the country has passed this type of legislation. There was no consultation with the Office of Broadband Development and broadband providers affected by this bill before it was introduced. My members oppose this bill for a variety of technical and policy reasons, but most importantly, because it will increase consumers' bills and harm low-income consumers. The added fee on consumers' bills will tip the affordability scale in the wrong direction. This legislation is contrary to everything that the state of Minnesota, the legislature, the Office of Broadband Development, and my members are doing to see that all Minnesotans have access to quality broadband. You've heard testimonies from the bill that are supporters of the bill that this will bridge the digital divide, allowing local units of government to have build-out requirements as part of their franchises, when in fact it's going to have the opposite effect. Mr. Chairman, members, this legislature established a process long ago to address broadband deployment challenges. For more than 15 years, the Governor's Broadband Task Force has worked to address issues to broadband deployment. Each year, the task force is required to file a report with recommendations to the Governor and the legislature. This has worked well, and this bill does an end run around that process that this very body put in place. This bill would create haves and have-nots. Providers will have to make logical business decisions on where to invest their limited capital dollars. Cities that do not have regulatory costs will win out over those that impose additional regulatory burdens. This bill creates an unlevel regulatory playing field for broadband investment at a time when the industry is working hard to get quality broadband to all Minnesotans in an already challenging regulatory environment.
And I'll need you to conclude your testimony.
And I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you,
I
sir.
timed it.
Next, we have Tony Mendoza, who will be followed by Jimmy Francis. Mr. Mendoza.
Mr. Chair, my name is Tony Mendoza. I'm counsel to the Minnesota Cable Communications Association. I'm here to express MCCA's opposition to HF 4182. MCCA's issues with the bill fall into two categories. First, the bill authorizes every level of local government to impose unlimited, overlapping franchise fees, taxes, on broadband and broadband-enabled services. Second, the bill would fundamentally change how broadband services are regulated, positioning local governments as the regulator of the future and creating new regulatory schemes for broadband-enabled services. This bill comes as the Biden administration and the FCC are about to issue rules making the FCC the primary broadband regulator. These rules, to be finalized next month, would preempt this bill because it's contrary to a federal policy of ensuring broadband is governed by a national framework. MCCA members must already obtain a cable franchise and pay franchise fees that support public educational and governmental PEG access programming. Federal law caps these franchise fees at 5% of gross revenue from video services, which this bill does not. In 2023 alone, MCCA members paid approximately $45 million in cable, franchise, and PEG fees to local governments. Pursuant to federal law, franchise fees are passed through to customers. The effect of stacking multiple new franchise fees on top of existing video franchise fees would dramatically increase the cost of every consumer's digital life. The proposed fees are regressive taxes falling heaviest on low-income customers. The bill violates federal laws and FCC rules prohibiting local governments from assessing duplicative franchise fees and from regulating broadband services. And I have to make a point about Mr. Bradley's comment earlier about the Sixth Circuit decision in the city of Eugene. In that case, the Sixth Circuit struck down a broadband franchise. They did not uphold it. The bill's fee provisions also violate the Internet Tax Freedom Act. This bill is touted as the Equal Access to Broadband Act, but the bill would widen the digital divide by erecting new local barriers and increasing the cost of broadband for all customers. Thank you for the opportunity to share MCCA's concerns about this bill.
Thank you. Next is Jimmy Francis, who will be followed by Jeremy Crandell. Mr. Francis.
Mr. Chair, committee members, good afternoon. My name is Jimmy Francis. I'm the mayor of the city of South St. Paul, and in 1982, South St. Paul joined 6 other cities to form Northern Dakota County Cable Communications Commission, NDC4. South St. Paul enthusiastically supports this House File 4182, and we've entered a resolution of support into the record as well. South St. Paul and all of our 7 member cities of NDC4 are committed to ensuring the continued vitality and development of our region through high-capacity broadband. For more than 42 years, we have championed the public interest in cable, telecom, broadband by providing a forum for strategic partnerships. Through our cable TV franchise, we've enabled one of the first robust iNet with partnerships of 12 public entities and 41 buildings, providing a reliable and affordable option when it was not available from the private sector. NDC4 Commission has instituted a full build-out, no redlining or cherry-picking, resulting in the cable company continuing to extend its network to new developments and ensuring that the phone company's 2016 fiber upgrade offered a competitively priced second option for more neighborhoods. Today, local franchising of broadband is needed to ensure that the deployment is not only border to border across the state, but also within our communities, especially in light of the millions of dollars that are being distributed. We have provided strong consumer protection, a maximum level of rate regulation allowed. We have expert staff who answer complaints from residents willing to talk about the billing and service problems. These local franchise benefits would be extended to broadband operators who use our public right-of-way. Many of our residents who do not wish to use a chat or a bot to try to call a 1-800 number to somebody overseas. PEG public education government programming is also very vital to us. And so, in closing, the Equal Access to Broadband Act extends the many benefits of local franchising to our present world, where broadband is an essential service necessary to live, work, play in our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next, we have Jeremy Crandell, who will be followed by Matt Westahoff. Mr. Crandell.
Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, my name is Jeremy Crandall. I'm here on behalf of CTIA, the Trade Association for the Wireless Industry. I want to focus my time today on 2 points that are highly specific to the wireless industry alone. First, there exists right now a comprehensive federal regulatory construct governing wireless infrastructure deployment in this country and here in the state of Minnesota. It outlines a host of regulations that our industry must adhere to, as well as the very important role of state and local governments as well. Unfortunately, this bill does run headlong into that construct. I want to use one example of a 2018 FCC order that explicitly said that fees charged by localities for wireless infrastructure must be cost-based, saying specifically related to and caused by the deployment itself. And yet this bill does enable localities to require a provider to pay a franchise fee to, quote, raise revenue. I will note the city of Portland sued as it relates to that FCC order on this exact issue in 2020. Ultimately, federal law prevailed. The courts ruled in favor of the federal government, and Portland lost that case. This is just one of a number of examples in this bill that is clearly prohibited by the Federal Communications Act as well as the FCC. There are other specific examples in my written testimony. Setting aside the elements related to federal law, the bill as drafted does have significant state policy implications as well. First, it would make substantial changes to the state's current small cell law in place. It would remove current existing rights that are already in place, and it provides no guardrails on how a franchise designation will ultimately be approved. Finally, this is a critically important point that I want to leave you all with. Current Minnesota law, state law, already protects the role of localities to oversee and recover costs associated with the management of their rights of way. We believe in terms of the wireless industry, let's keep in place what is already working, and for these reasons we oppose House File 4182.
Thank you. Next, we have Matt Westahoff and then Jeff Tollefson, Councilmember Westahoff.
Thank you. Honorable Chair Stevenson, distinguished members of the committee, and before you today, not as just someone with 3 jobs, but as a citizen concerned about connectivity in the state of Minnesota. My name is Matt Westahoff. I run a IT managed service company called Foundation Technologies. I'm a board member of the Quad Cities Cable Commission, and I serve on the City of Ramsey's Council. These aren't just titles. These are vantage points from which I've witnessed the critical importance and inequities of our broadband infrastructure. Now let's talk about a state that is doing it right. North Dakota. Yes, the best state in the country for gigabit internet is North Dakota, where the internet runs like the Red River, fast and wide, reaching the corners of their state that our current infrastructure can barely dream of. But here we are, debating whether we should step up and allow cities to mitigate the digital redlining in our communities. HF 4182 isn't about mandating how local governments manage their right-of-way. It's about the choice. It's about allowing those of us in the culverts, the city councils and the local boards, to decide if we want to leverage franchise fees to not just pave our streets, but lay down the digital roads of our future. In Ramsey, we faced the franchise fee question head-on, only to reassess when the winds changed. The point? We had the choice. This isn't just about beating North Dakota or ensuring our businesses and remote workers aren't left in the digital dust. It's about acknowledging that the internet is as vital as water and electricity these days. It's about recognizing that without action, we risk widening the digital divide, segregating our communities not just by lines on a map, but by their access to information and to opportunity. The issue of funding community television or ensuring our rural areas are not left behind or granting municipalities the autonomy to shape their digital destinies, these are not small concerns. They are indicative of a larger challenge we face when adapting to a world where connectivity is no longer a luxury, but a necessity. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your service and consideration of my testimony today.
Thank you, Councilmember Westerhoff. Next, we have Jeff Tollefson. Mr. Tollefson.
Thank you, Chair Stevenson, members of the committee. My name is Jeff Tollefson. I serve as president of the Minnesota Technology Association. Businesses and residents across Minnesota rely on internet access for a number of things: access to education, work opportunities, government services, and so much more. And through the work of the Minnesota Office of Broadband, we've made great strides in our state in closing the digital divide by providing affordable internet access across our state. But passage of this bill could undermine these efforts and set back our state's progress in closing the digital divide. The franchise fees proposed are essentially a tax on Minnesota residents, as the extra costs get passed on to consumers through higher monthly bills. This deeply regressive tax would hit low-income Minnesotans the hardest and widen the digital divide for those that have not the resources to absorb the higher costs. If cities truly need to raise revenue to fund public access television, there are more equitable ways to do this that aren't so regressive. Property taxes, for example. And at a time when it's easier and cheaper to live stream city council events, it seems that this is less about recovering costs and more about simply generating extra revenue. There are also significant legal issues involved, as federal law expressly states that local governments have no authority to regulate the entry of mobile service providers, as this is the jurisdiction of the FCC. In addition, franchise fees based on the revenue of a service provider violate an FCC order that such fees must be cost-based. Legality aside, this is not the time for this body to hinder the efforts to advance broadband expansion and digital equity in Minnesota. This bill will divert resources away from the new broadband deployment and increase costs for customers, with a disproportionate impact on low-income families and seniors who do not have flexibility in their budgets.
And I'll need you to conclude your testimony.
For these reasons and more, we urge you to not pass House File 4182 in its current form. Thank you.
All right, members, we are going to go a little over time today. We have clearance to do so. We'll move to member discussion. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Freiberg. Invite you back up here. I think it's really cute, your title of this bill, Equal Access to Broadband Act, when in reality it should be labeled the Expensive Access and Bloating Government Act, because that's exactly what this bill does. For you, Representative Freiberg, can you explain to us how, after so much that was put into government budgets over the last biennium, why we would be pursuing a policy and how it would help low-income Minnesotans when you have a bill before us here that provides for unlimited fee increases and overlapping fees that will be passed on to the lowest income Minnesotans.
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you. I'm glad for the opportunity to respond to that. Our current broadband system actually leaves many of those areas out currently. This act will make sure cities can make sure everybody gets treated equitably. I think some of those areas that they're claiming this would hit financially are those that are least well served by broadband currently, and this bill would make sure that cities can make sure that those areas are treated equitably.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and for everybody, you just heard, it's about bloating government. It's about benefiting their budgets. So Representative Freiberg, can you explain for me, after so many testifiers brought forward PEG programmers, as to why we don't see any specification within your bill to say that these funds would go to fund PEG programmers?
Representative Freiberg.
Yeah, the bill preserves local control to meet community needs, similar to how cable franchising fees are handled. A franchise fee may be used for community television based on local decision-making. But as I said, our current franchise model for cable does not actually specify that any specific portion go towards PEG fees. I'd be open to discussions about including a specific percentage or something in there, but at this point, the bill is just modeled kind of after the way cable is handled right now.
I can give you one more follow-up, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Freiberg. Again, this is about bloating government budgets and revenue slush fund for local governments here. And so, Representative Freiberg, a lot has been made in testimony given today that there are significant concerns with two different pieces of federal legislation. I get that you might not care about additional lawsuits that may exist because this bill moves forward, but can you express for us how this bill will interact with federal law, specifically the Federal Cable Act and the Internet Tax Freedom Act, which specifically outlines that this is in contention with?
I'm going to let Representative Freiberg respond to that, but I really object to the way that you're discussing Representative Freiberg here, telling him that he might not care about things, mischaracterizing what he said by saying that you heard it right there, he said bloated. Like, let's leave the commentary out of other people's words. Let Representative Freiberg speak for himself, and you can speak for yourself. Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that statement. I think I'd like to turn it over to my testifier for this, since he is a lawyer working in this area.
Absolutely. Mr. Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative. Very good questions. Thank you for that question. When we're looking at federal law, we're looking at a couple of different federal laws that were mentioned. The first was a small cell order from the FCC. And as I mentioned in my earlier testimony, we're not talking about small cells or wireless in this bill. We're talking about broadband franchising of wired operators. So that really doesn't apply at all. There was a case mentioned, the City of Portland case. That was a case that was litigating the small cell order. Again, not applicable at all to this discussion. My friend Mr. Mendoza mentioned the Sixth Circuit case. I disagree with his representation of that case. I actually was one of the litigators on that case. And that case did not involve overturning a franchise. It involved in part a license fee. So when we're talking about preemption and these types of things, you need to know that we've done our homework on this. And we don't throw preemption lightly around. Let me also just briefly talk about the bloating slush fund thing that you were mentioning. This is the Equal Access to Broadband Act, and through franchising, local governments will be able to make sure that all of their residents are served with the same level of quality of service across their entire footprint. Let me give you an example of how this works and how it doesn't work, okay? When we look at cable franchising, local governments right now are able to franchise cable operators. And through that process, local governments made sure that every resident in their city was served with the same level of service across the board. Now, let me give you another example where local franchising is not allowed, and that's in the telephone business, okay? With telephone, you have very uneven service across footprints all over the state, including the metro. Let me give you another example. When a phone company came and wanted to provide cable service for the first time in the metro area, they had to, for the first time, get a franchise from a local government. And the local government required, starting with the city of Minneapolis, but followed by every city in the metro area, they required the phone operator to equitably build out their entire city over a reasonable period of time, just like they did with cable, by the way. And that was the very first time in 100 years of regulation of phone companies, not through franchising, through other means. That was the first time ever that they were required to equitably build out an entire city. So when we're talking about this bill, this is the Equal Access to Broadband bill. And if you want to be serious about making sure that all residents across the state of Minnesota, and particularly every city in the state of Minnesota, if you want to make sure that they all have equal access to broadband, this bill should be supported.
Okay, we have one more member on the list. I'm going to let Representative Niska speak, and then we're going to vote on this bill, and then we're going to take testimony. There's just two people who signed up. I want them to get a chance to speak since they're here today, and we'll lay over the last bill on the agenda. Representative Niska, if you can be brief, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will resist the temptation to dive into Federal Circuit case law with the testifier. I just want to make a brief comment, which is I think it's important to contrast Representative Freiberg's answers about local control, the uncapped tax we're creating here, and the lack of any limit or even policy direction beyond the nice title in this bill about what local cities are going to do about it. And to contrast this bill that we're looking at right now with the bill we just looked at about trying to limit junk fees, telling businesses that they can't use deceptive pricing in their, the bills that they pass. What this bill would properly be, I think, labeled would be the junk local tax bill. What this bill does is it creates an unlimited, uncapped, unrestricted new source of revenue for local governments. And I certainly can appreciate why local officials would support a new way to raise revenue in a way that's less transparent, that's on every customer's monthly cable bill, where they wouldn't necessarily expect to see a local tax, instead of funding local government through the property taxes, which local government officials are very easily held accountable for. So I think that this is a bad direction to go in. I appreciate my friend from Ramsey who testified about a disagreement we had in Ramsey about a franchise fee. But what this really is a new, different way to tax people by city governments, especially in a way that the city government officials are going to be held less accountable for. So I think this is a really bad idea. I hope we reject it. And Mr. Chair, I request a roll call.
All right, there will be a roll call. Representative Freiberg renews his motion that House File 4182 be re-referred to the State and Local Government Finance Committee. Mr. Durfee will take the roll. The chair votes aye.
Chair Stevenson, aye. Vice Chair Katoiser-Wattoon.
Aye.
Vice Chair Katoiser-Wattoon, aye. Lead O'Driscoll.
No.
Lead O'Driscoll, no. Representative Bierman.
Bierman, aye.
Bierman, aye. Representative Cha.
Aye.
Cha, aye. Representative Dotseth.
Dotseth, no.
Dotseth, no. Representative Freiberg.
Aye.
Representative Freiberg, aye. Representative Cleaborn.
Aye.
Cleaborn, aye. Representative Kagel.
Aye.
Kagel, aye. Representative Kraft.
Aye.
Kraft, aye. Representative Liebling.
Aye.
Liebling, aye. Representative New Brindley, Representative Niska.
No.
Niska, no. Representative Perryman.
Perryman, no.
Perryman, no. Representative Farr.
Far no.
Farr, no. Representative Schultz.
Schultz, no.
Schultz, no. Representative Tabke.
Yes.
Tabke, yes.
With 10 ayes and 6 nays, the motion does prevail, and House File 4182 is recommended to be re-referred to the State and Local Government Finance and Policy Committee. Thank you, Representative Freiberg.